Welcome to Season 4 of the Questions With podcast, hosted by Quest Ventures, the top venture capital fund in Asia. I am your host, April Vano, and join me as we explore the dynamic startup ecosystem and business landscape in the Philippines. As we listen to thought leaders and industry experts, innovators, and entrepreneurs, we'll uncover the stories, insights, and trends across different industries shaping the future of this vibrant Southeast Asian nation. Today, we have with us Linartes Viloria, a champion for social and economic development in the Philippines. Linartes has been working with the International Labour Organization in implementing national projects promoting inclusive economic growth in the country. From promoting technology skills development for marginalized groups to empowering women entrepreneurs, their work has been instrumental in creating opportunities for more Filipinos and enterprises to prosper. In this episode, we'll delve into her views and outlook on the Philippines, uncovering invaluable insights and inspiration along the way through her stories and experiences. In this episode, we welcome Linartes Viloria. Hi, Linartes.
Hi, April. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. Thank you for having me for this podcast.
Of course, welcome, and thank you for spending the time with us and sharing your insights and hopefully learning about the Philippines with your experience and what you've been doing right in the Philippines. Your work has covered impact areas such as gender equality, inclusion, decent work, and economic growth, and these are really important and essential, I would say, advocacies, right? So what inspires you or what motivates you to do this kind of work throughout your career?
Well, for the past 7 years, that has been the work that I've been doing here in the Philippines. I read somewhere, Sigmund Freud once said that love and work and love, that's all there is. And for me, that stuck with me, the importance really of work, towards creating opportunities for others, and work in the sense that is the essence of us in existence, right? Like, it helps us link up to the things that we love to do, and at the same time the things that we want to do for others. And I think that has guided me throughout my career in development, in such a way that the roles that I have taken both in the private sector, in government, and international organizations, and in the nonprofit sector as well. Because really it's about opening opportunities for others. I saw in my own life how these opportunities have actually opened doors in terms of opportunities of in education, in training, or just linking up to a network that can help you. And I think having benefited from those opportunities, that has been in a way my motivation of doing the same for others and expanding that, particularly for women and marginalized groups, to have those opportunities. Because as somebody who has benefited from that, we know how tough it is also, that if you don't have these network linkages, these training opportunities, education opportunities, it's really tough for you to compete or to get these jobs, or even just advancement opportunities for you to be able to get to where you need to be. And so I think that that started me out. Even growing up, I was part of youth development activities. My first foray was, I don't know, 14 or 16, I forget.
Wow, so
but I was
official work yet. You were already
not official work.
Part.
So it was Boys and Girls Week in our town, and I was elected girl mayor, and I really
Wow.
lived to that role. And of course, when you're young, you think you can make that change. But that was my first foray, to in development work. And I guess also taking up political science in college, and then pursuing law, and then also doing development communications work, where I worked also in publishing, and then eventually in government, where I became an analyst, in the Department of Labor, the Institute for Labor Studies. So it really, it's really that evolution of exposure to work, also to like-minded individuals who have the same passion, ideas, and advocacy to support others. I think that starts you off, in that journey that you have in the next, at least for me, in the last 17 years that I've been in development. And I think that also gives you, that background, and at the same time the learnings that you have along the way from different sectors, from government, how public service is delivered, also the lens that you have, maybe for certain opportunities, for instance, you are able to see perspectives for the youth, if you are providing voices for the youth, or if you're supporting women, for instance, being more aware of what are the opportunities available to women, or what opportunities are more attractive to women. At the same time, what are the barriers that women face for these kinds of opportunities? So I think that comes over time, and at the same time, that kind of self-awareness that you might have because you are exposed to these experiences, opportunities, and potential people that can, support these causes along the way. I think that's very crucial.
That's amazing. And I guess in a way you were able to have a great path, in that impact space and spaces, right? That you've worked with. And maybe you can share a little bit more about these like key experiences and highlights, and I guess what you call your work and your love, right? Throughout your career. So our listeners can also see what has been or what you've been doing, throughout your career.
I've always, and people ask me, how do you create that network? Whenever, because now networking is a thing. People say that your network is your network, and they would ask me, right? They would ask me, how were you able to build your network through time? And I said, I know this is gonna sound weird, but I do cold calls. I do because I had some experience in sales. Really doing advocacy work is really about selling your cause, and there have been times, and lots of partnerships I've had wherein I email people, hi, I'm with this office. I really like your work. I saw your work on Google, and I think, we have an opportunity to collaborate. I am from this office, and it has happened several times, for instance, from the National Youth Commission, for instance, their chairperson, and we were doing something for youth employment and migration. And I emailed him, and to this day, he said, Lights just cold called me. She emailed. I didn't know her, and now we're good friends, But I've had that. Or, for instance, when I first met, I started collaborating with Job Street for one of our biggest job fairs. I think still, it's still one of the biggest job fairs in the Philippines. So again, I saw this lady who spoke about their work in providing jobs at Job Street. And after the talk, I said, hey, I really enjoyed listening to your talk. I am thinking of this big fair that we want to do. Do you think this is something that you would like to collaborate on? And she said, that's great. I want to do that. When can we talk and all that stuff, right? So sometimes, we don't have to overthink it. Sometimes we just, go over there and actually, ask them, is there an opportunity to collaborate? But at the same time, people also can tell, right? So people can tell how passionate you are. And I think that's also something I bring, when I really am passionate about any project at all, it shows, and people want to work with like-minded individuals who are passionate about the cause, who have also the track record as well, right? Because if you don't also have a track record of, delivering on purpose-driven initiatives, they might think twice. But when they see your passion and you have a plan of action to do it, right? Whatever it is, whether it's for your work or your personal advocacies, I think it will get people to join you. And I think, I read somewhere, it's one thing to be right. It's not enough that you are right. It has to work. It has to be effective. And for you as a person, yes, I might be saying the right thing, but if I'm not getting you to, get to action, it's just me stating a fact. But if you really believe in something and you have the numbers for it, and this is where the value of coming from an organization that has done the research, and at the same time have the experiences of other people to show that this is happening and this is something that we can work together on, right? And I think, that's a great formula for getting people to join you, getting people to invest. That's another thing, right? It's one thing that you have a very good cause, but if you can't sell it, how will you sell it to other stakeholders, right? Much more with an investor. You really have to you really have to bring your game if you want, if you want those needed investments, if you want those needed votes, if you want those needed support, from your stakeholders, investors. Because they have to believe that you can deliver on it and that you believe in it, and I think that's key. And I guess this is where your communication skills and your critical thinking skills, even creativity, right? How will you present it in such a way that that it's not as it is, but really, you show the potential of it, and you show that it logically can support the work that you're doing. And I think that's something that as leaders or any person, in impact work should have. You should be able to communicate what it is that you need your stakeholders to do, what it is that your investors should invest on, and at the same time make them feel good that they are supporting that. But maybe you can convince them forcefully, but that doesn't exactly keep them with you, right? I've been very lucky that people I don't know who I've worked with, collaborated on, have been my good friends, because in the work that I've been doing, because we found that mutual purpose of whether it's in development work for marginalized groups or it's for skills development, you find kindred souls. You find kindred souls in development work or in social entrepreneurship, and because of that, you kind of attract the kind of people you want to hang out with, right? And they want to hang out with you.
Create your own tribe of like-minded.
You create your tribe. But not necessarily your cult, though. More of, right? Like, you're just, you just want to do these things together. Or maybe, you're in that circle. You might not work directly with them now, but later, your advocacies will come across each other because you go in that same circle also. So, I've always believed, that these disciplines are all interconnected. And if these are things that you work on, especially if you want to do something that's scalable and sustainable, right? People who are in that line of work will most probably work with you. Maybe in different fields, but within that same purpose, of passion and integrity. So,
Wow.
I think that's been looking back, right? Looking back, I think and you take care of these relationships. If you work with passion and integrity, it's not, you become consistent with that kind of work, and you ensure that you're on the right path, meaning you're doing good, and also ensuring that those who support you along the way are doing the same thing. So you kind of avoid being in a place also that's not sustainable, because if it's something that runs counter to what is right and what is good, right, it's really tough for you to stay in that track.
That's really, yes, it's really incredible work. And of course, it's really long term, and, investing in the development and engaging the different stakeholders in these sectors, right? And you mentioned about these challenges and these opportunities at the same time. And I'm sure there are more stories that we can probably unpack a little bit, maybe not all with the short amount of time we have for this podcast, but maybe through your projects in the Philippines, and you mentioned a few of them already. If we can really maybe zoom in a little more with, cases or examples of like milestones and successes from these initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I started doing field work actually when I was already with the Bikes for the Philippines. So, like some people would say that that's a very interesting job to have, considering that you're traveling all over the Philippines, going on a bike. And giving bikes to kids, who have to walk more than 3 miles to school. But really, it's when you look at it, at first you think, okay, if you have these bikes, you think that will be the turnkey, right, to for them to be able to go to school. But then when you go to these areas, where they live, so before we bring the bikes, we have to assess the area where they are biking to and biking from, right? And you realize that each area would have a different terrain, and each area would have maybe they have a rougher, it's shorter distance to the school, but it's a mountainous area, so it would need a different bike. And if you think about it, some solutions have to be customized based on the area, and also based on the people, based on the target beneficiaries you have. So for instance, we would have a beneficiary of, I think there were 3 sisters, for instance, that had to wake up at 3 a.m., start cooking, and then they bike around 4 o'clock to school because it would be that far. And as women, as girls, so the one thing that we had to think about also, yes, we will give you a bike, but how do you ensure that you maintain it, for instance, right? And when you think about it, they would, the girls would say, oh, I'd like a bike, I want a bike. And then when we say, what if you get a flat tire? What if in the middle of the road, your bike doesn't work? What will you do? And they looked at us and they said, I don't know, we wait for somebody to help us. And that became an eye-opener for us that, we have to teach these girls how to fix their bikes. We wanted to emphasize the principle that, you don't need others to do it for you. You can do it yourself. And so we had to do bike repair classes for the beneficiaries, so that we ensure that the bike that they use would be well maintained, and they wouldn't, I would tell them, you don't need a man to fix your bike. You can actually fix their bikes for them if they have a problem on the road. And I think that was a great eye-opener for me, particularly for women and girls, in the countryside, on how do we empower them with the knowledge and also with that kind of determination that, the only people, that they can depend on themselves in times of trouble. And at that moment too, we were witnessing girls, fixing the bikes and actually explaining explaining the problems of their bikes in case when they're biking to school. And you can see how empowering their smiles are. And one of them actually taught me how to bike, I remember, because when I joined Bikes for the Philippines, I didn't know how to bike. And it was one of our students, who taught me how to bike. And for her, it was also very empowering for her that she was teaching somebody older than her to bike. And I guess also for the students, also just seeing me learning, at the same time as they are for biking. It's important, like as somebody in development, to actually understand the interest of the target communities that you have, and understanding the dynamics of the role of women and girls in that community, and how does their education actually support them in thriving. And I think that was something that I kept thinking with before I entered the Women in STEM program, because it's really understanding what are the barriers for women, especially when it comes to non-traditional occupations. Like in that case, a woman fixing her bike, that is something that is not normal that we see, and yet when they are shown, when they're given the skills to be able to defy that norm, they are capable. It's just that they never had the skills to do it. And that's why when we started doing the Women in STEM program, we actually looked at what are the barriers. It's not about providing people scholarships, but it's actually trying to understand, like, what is their need for them to be able to start training, to get educated, or even practicing that profession. What are the things that hold them back, and how can we encourage them? So also for women, that was one thing we learned. So when we started giving these scholarships, they would say, when you put up a scholarship there, everybody will apply. But when we had the first year for that, it wasn't automatic that they would be applied. They would inquire, but they would not necessarily go through with it. And when we saw this need, so we coordinated with the schools who were part of the program and told them, when they do inquire, we make it easier for them, to apply. Like, we don't just give the information, we welcome them to come to the schools, and so that we can explain it to them better. We provide the information. At the same time, as much as possible, also when we do interview for them, we also see, like, how is this going to help them and their families, or in their communities, if they have this kind of education. So the scholarship was promoted in a different way. We had, I think we had 2 rounds of changing the way we promoted it. And we wanted it to become more gender responsive, something that resonates, with women, that when they see when they see this announcement, it's something that appeals to their interests, appeals to their needs. And it changed. Now, when we started looking at that lens, it changed the way women were responding to the announcement of the scholarship with TESDA. At the same time, what we also noticed is that when we promoted the scholarship in women organizations, they were also more responsive to that. They knew that it was a safe space for them to believe these kinds of opportunities. And at the same time, if they are seeing other women also choose these opportunities, it becomes an encouragement for them. So, like in one case, one of our favorite stories for the Women in STEM program was the story of Honey Jane Santa Ana. So she was a college dropout. She was on her way home. She was riding a bus. And as some people do while they're waiting on the bus on their way home, right? They're mindlessly scrolling, and they found the announcement on Facebook, and she was riding home with her best friend. And she said, hey, look at this opportunity. So the scholarship was called #WomenCanDoIt. So Women Can Do IT. And she said, why don't we join this? It's the deadline on this date. We don't need to be a college graduate. All we need to do is apply. We need to be of this age, and we can learn web development. And so they applied, they got in. They were able to get this internship in Indra. So it was a data analytics company based in Spain. And around that time, I think they were already starting their work on automation. And I think after they finished the course, since they took their internship there, they said, are you interested in doing robotic process automation? And they said, we're willing to try. And, that started her after learning code, HTML, Java, and then they moved on to robotic process automation. And this was like 6 years ago. And both of them, she and her best friend, continue to be in this line of work. And so, like somebody who has never considered tech in their lives before entering the scholarship, and encouraged, by, because they had each other going to that scholarship, and it was an all-girls coding class. It was, they had that enabling environment. They had, the support of their peers. They had a very supportive facilitator on helping them to learn to code, and that was a enabling environment for them to enter, into the tech industry at the same time started there. So learning from that, we know that if we are able to create these interventions that is responsive to the needs of women, that is responsive to that helps them, overcome these challenges and barriers. This can become an opportunity for them to equally participate, particularly for non-traditional occupations in STEM. This is the power, of these kinds of programs, that if we look into the situations, where marginalized groups are, what are the different barriers they face, we can be able to identify, what are those programs, or what are the needed adjustments, or maybe what is the needed policies for them for to open these opportunities for them. Of course, it's not that easy, it's not just the implementing agency, but it is it is a diverse set of actors, diverse situations that you have to look at in order for you to be able to open up these opportunities for them. If you feel free to ask questions, either if you're still there, because you'll hear me.
It's great. Yes, of course. No, I think this is great, and you touched on a few things, and definitely it's really about empowering them, but leading up to that, it's what's next, right? You've empowered them to believe in themselves, but now you have to equip them. And I think this is really the relevant contribution of programs like the ILO and different development agencies. And you touched on also, of course, STEM and technology, and bringing them into this new world, or these industries that is digitalization and technology disruption. And we need to make sure that opportunities can also include members of society to be part of it. And I think that's really something that also from coming from the industry and the private sector, we need to take a look at who we are also bringing into the field, or as employees, or as stakeholders, and of course as consumers and users. And maybe to kind of build on that, I know that you're also working in delivering basic services, right? There's a new project that you're working on, and really tapping into technology tools. Perhaps you can also share a little bit more about that. I know that it is really something that also the government is trying to implement, especially for inclusive growth.
Yeah, for sure. Starting from that work in women in STEM, and then later on women entrepreneurship, it's seeing that one side, right? Do social norms actually affect, the availability of these opportunities? for people to go in non-traditional areas of work or non-traditional occupations, or being entrepreneurs. But on the other side, for those who really don't have these opportunities, what are those available? Mechanisms for them to be able to survive, and this is where in this new project that I'm working on supporting integrated formalization of the informal economy through social protection and decent work. It's really about looking at workers in the informal sector. And what we mean by informal sector, these are workers who do not have formal arrangements at work, meaning they don't have that kind of employer-employee relationship, or they might be in one but do not have social security coverage. And when we see these kinds of when we see these kinds of work arrangements, we are looking at do they have the opportunity? What if crisis comes into their lives, like if there was COVID-19, if there was climate change events, that can affect their ability to work. What kind of social security coverage do they have, so that in times that they do not have work, these can be their safety nets. So this is where the importance of health insurance comes in, right? And it's surprising to know that some people, because they're just interested in making that everyday salary, for instance, they forgo being covered by SSS, PhilHealth, right, health insurance. And actually, for instance, during my first few years at work, I was one of those people. Like, I was fine just being paid my salary. I didn't mind that, they did not deduct for my social security coverage, right? Until I got sick, because I was so stressed at work, I got sick and I had to be hospitalized, and I had, nothing. My money I didn't have enough savings because I was still young at that time. And that was a turning point in my life, in the sense that I need to be at a job. I need to be at a job that can not only pay my everyday expenses, but ensure that if something happens to me, or when I grow old, I would have something to cover for me. And this is a situation that like 4 billion of the population have, approximately 4 billion do not have social security coverage. And can you imagine during COVID-19 on what they had to go through, because when people were losing jobs, people were losing the ability to get to work, they did not have that social security coverage for them to be able to get that. And so here in our new project, we're looking into, what are those challenges for them to get at? What are, and what kind of interventions from the government, from employers are needed, so that they would be able, so that they would be protected? Or, what is the role, for instance, of organizations of informal sector workers to provide them that kind of support, for instance? If we organize them, it's easier to look at different interventions, whether these are contributory social security or non-contributory. When we say non-contributory, this is subsidies that are provided by the local government or the national government. And also looking into how technology can make that easier. Maybe the reason why you don't have you don't have social security is because the administrative requirements of registering, remitting is so difficult that that you'd rather not do it. It's a waste of time, for instance. You'd rather work online, or you'd rather work than go line up. And so again, it's looking at what are these barriers, what are these challenges, And how can the different, how can government, how can private sector, how can technology, make that easier? With the growth of digital payments, right, and all these ways of being able to transact online. If we have these tools already, why is it still difficult? And so again, it's really understanding where they're coming from. And the thing about the informal sector is it's a very heterogeneous group, there is no one size fits all, like for instance, one group of informal sector workers, for instance, would be our gig economy workers who are in the transport sector, your delivery riders, right? Your Grab drivers, or in one side, for instance, for women, you have your freelance knowledge workers. And again, within that area, they all have these different jobs that make it, number one, difficult to organize them, or maybe, these are not opportunities that are available to them. Or for instance, agricultural workers, maybe they want to, but they don't have enough money to actually contribute. They'd rather, buy a kilo of rice than, to pay for their SSS, for instance, which they won't enjoy until they retire. So it's really, again, what is the story behind each of these group of workers, and how do we make it easier for them? How can technology make it easier for them? Or maybe there has to be more investments, right, for different sets of workers, so that they might be able to access these services when they need it the most. So it's still in the beginning stage of the project, but again, it's really about finding out these stories behind, and really looking at the pains and gains, those bottlenecks that it's not about blaming people, but it's actually understanding, how this service can be provided, how this service can be actually accessed, and how do you ensure that kind of dignity of work that they can, studies would show that workers who are covered by Social Security are actually more productive because they know that they are protected by their social insurance, or they have these safety nets that they can rely on in times of crisis. So it's an exciting, but I think it's going to be a lot of conversations with the different actors at work. And yeah, I was telling them, now that we have, because they were saying we were in these discussions before, for instance, but these discussions were being thought of pre-pandemic, pre-digital payments, pre-remote work and all that. And so maybe it can be an opportunity, but at the same time, if we don't, people would say, the administrative component of it is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's really unraveling, what will work best for each group of informal sector workers.
Yes, thank you for sharing those insights. It's very practical, and I would say really zoomed into the differences and the diversity of this informal sector, which I think is a huge part of society. And I think listening to what you've shared, perhaps other entrepreneurs or innovators can pick on those as starting points for the challenges or the problems that they can try to build products and solutions for. And I know that that's also your objective through that project, and perhaps that's where we are going to bridge development work, the stakeholders that you are engaging, and link that to entrepreneurs that are also these problem solvers, right? Using
Yes.
technology to use innovation and create more solutions for that. And perhaps to me, that's also like, if I can build on what you shared and ask you, like, because you're on the ground, because these potential, let's say, customers or users that are really I guess in that space for growth and development, like, how would you say if an entrepreneur is looking into solving or addressing these challenges, like where should they start? How can they be, creating something of value to this really large, you would say sector, right? Of
Right.
informal
Sector.
economy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thinking with my startup hat, right? Because when we create these apps, when we create this technology, you go to the core wherein, what kind of problem are you solving, right? Whether it's to get a ride, right? Or for you to make it easier to find a school, to make it easier for you to make payments, right? And in this case, right, who is your target group, for instance, because the informal sector is very heterogeneous. So, for instance, you want to make it easier for vendors, for your vendors to be able to, I don't know, order, goods and services, for instance. What kind of technology will you provide for them? What technology is available for them, right? Is it through their phone, or is it through a buy-in center, right? It's really thinking about, you think about what is your target market? Is it the base of the pyramid, for instance? What in particular there? Um, you know, and designing that business model based on that makes it easier for them. For a minimal fee, it makes it easier for them to be able to access these services. So, for instance, you want to make it easier. If you encounter, usually it really comes from your personal why, right? Like, I want to make it easier for me to pay, for instance, all these contributions, for instance. I want to, once I open my app, for instance, I can pay for my SSS, PhilHealth, Pag-ibig, what else? Or any other insurance payment in just one portal, for instance. It makes it easier for them. Or, for instance, what would make it easier for them to access hospital services, for instance, right? Like, I remember, again, these things, this come to you when you get sick. So one time when I got sick, and they had I was numb from the hip down, and I had to pay for the bill, but I couldn't move, right? And I was thinking, why don't you have an app that I can just access on my palm here? I don't have to feel bad that I'm single, that now I have to ask the nurse to push me to the cashier and push me to the hospital payment center for me to get out. So, it's really coming from that problem, right? Really identifying what irks you the most, and if you had technology to make it easier for you, or for members of the informal sector, for those you want to help, and this is where the social entrepreneur in you would come in, right? Like, what would that be, and outline that process. I would, having witnessed the design of an app, for instance, like, really I would understand, like, if I put this service in, what database is being pulled out, and how does that connect to the databases of the services that I want to access, or that I want to I want to reach out to, right? And I think it's that, right? Like, how do you make it easier? What are the barriers, and how can technology remove those barriers? How do you make it easier for them? And along those lines, think of your business model that in the sense that that it's really about scale, right? It's really about all that population of workers, for instance, or that population of subscribers, for instance, accessing that service, having the same pain that you have, and being able to, in a way, you're making their lives better by providing that technology, that connects them to these essential services that they need. It's looking for that target market, and at the same time seeing their pains, and providing them solutions, to those to that pain that they have, and helping them, and just making it part of their lives to do that. That they hardly think that they're buying a service, but actually it's part of it's part of what they do. It's part of what they love in work, right? So I don't know if that makes sense, but really it's really about identifying that pain. Identify that pain and turning it into something that can support others who have the same pain that you have. And I think entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs are really about that, right? We're solution providers, right? It's really providing that solution to problems that we encounter every day. That we would say had there been something like this that would make it easier. So you're not only solving your pain, but you're solving a lot of people's pain by providing that service. So I don't know if that makes sense, but really for me, like when I think about how do you make it easier, for instance, for a Grab driver to pay for his pag-ibig payments? So what kind of technology does he have? So for instance, I think Grab has that, wherein they have that wallet, wherein the earnings of the driver is there, so that can already be allocated. In your mind, that can be deducted, right? So what are those available tools that they have that make it easier, that make it very instinctive, for them to do that, and instead of driving to an SSS office, to a pag-ibig office, they can easily do it on their phone or whatever tools that they have for them. Or maybe it's a desk, maybe it's an express lane. These are all these tools. How do you make it easier for the user? I remember that during my app days, don't make the user think, make their lives easier through the technology that you create.
Yes, startups are said to be like painkillers, right? Or the solution that you have to solve the problem and make that pain go away, and people actually willing to pay for it, and that's your business model. But yeah, that's really helpful, and I think that really builds on that mindset for entrepreneurs to really be customer or user centric, and really figuring out how they can create that value and be a painkiller, right? By using whatever app or solution or innovative way of delivering services. And you touched on a few things there. I know we don't have much time with you, but perhaps also to kind of build on, you said we need to have entrepreneurs thinking it this way, right? Like social entrepreneurs or startups that are looking at, the sustainable development goals. And that's something that we also really want to, promote and advocate for. What would be your, views on specific areas? I don't know if you want to pick certain top 3 SDGs that you think innovation can play an important role and can accelerate, the solutions for these problems. Like maybe you can pick your top, if you were going to create, startups or work with startups and find these entrepreneurs. What would be the key opportunities to look into, especially for the Philippines?
Of course, I mean, as ILO, it's really number 8, right? For decent work. But I think each one really has, again, it will go back to, it's easier for an entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur in that aspect to actually think about pains that are closer to their heart, right? Pains that are closer to their own experiences, because it makes you more, it gives you more empathy to the cause, and it makes it easier also for you to reach out to the different stakeholders in finding that out, right? So for instance, some would choose for it, depending also on the area, because you might have a great idea on one SDG, but you don't have enough information or you're not from that area that actually has that need. Like for instance, if you want to look into food security, for instance, and remember during the pandemic, a lot of people actually saw the need for more understanding on logistics. For instance, how do you connect producers to the consumers, for instance, and what kind of technology they have for that, and maybe social entrepreneurs who have been exposed to the transport of goods, are better, better understand it, better understand the different linkages involved, right? Or in my case, for instance, I've always been in education. My mom was in the education department, and all my life, I've been exposed to teachers, and it's really about that values of how do we make it easier for students to learn? How do we make it easier for teachers to reach out to their students? What kind of learning modules? So my mindset is in that area, which is why I'm in education, tech, right, and training and development. It's really about looking into that and how technology becomes an enabling force to make those goals possible. So I wouldn't recommend one SDG, because really, I recognize also the individual interests and strengths of entrepreneurs. And it's really, especially entrepreneurs are always like, we have challenges every day. It's a never ending, and that's what makes being an entrepreneur so interesting, right? It's so dynamic, You always have new problems to solve, and or even if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, right? It's always about understanding, these barriers and how do you find solutions to it. And if, as a woman, if you're a woman entrepreneur, then it's really tapping also on your needs as a woman, on understanding what women need and how can you make it possible. How can you open opportunities for women? So, among women entrepreneurs, it's important also that they hear the voice of other women entrepreneurs. And this is why I also appreciate women entrepreneurship programs. It's because when we have that safe space to listen to the needs of different women, to the challenges that are very specific to them that men entrepreneurs do not experience, we are better able to design these solutions together. For instance, is it for instance, I don't know, a technology that can connect women entrepreneurs, right, from different regions, understanding what community means and how can that community actually help you reach out to other entrepreneurs, or gain access to funding, or gain access to new markets, for instance. So the opportunities really are, and it's really unlimited, and it's really about understanding like what particular problem do you want to solve, and how what do you have in your arsenal, what do you have in your toolbox that can actually provide that unique value to the problem, and at the same time your expertise would be best for it. One solution may not resonate to another entrepreneur because that would not be in the area of their interest, for instance. I mean, it can be a good investment maybe, but if you are not if you're not in that right if you do not have that resources to be able to grow that opportunity, then it won't be a good match, right? So right now you hear a lot of work that is looking into sustainability, right? Because we are seeing all these rapid changes happening now in technology, climate change, demographic transitions, right? And for us that we're looking at the future of work, and how do you help the transition from school to work, and how do you support also the transition from one job to another, which have been changed by technology, for instance, or because of climate change, those opportunities are no longer available, for instance. So that's another thing, looking into those transitions and how are we helping people go through these transitions. So if you are looking at the transition from school to work, apps in education and training, apps in job boards, for instance, marketplaces that involve, connecting people to jobs, connecting people to schools, connecting people to training. Or, for instance, in sustainability, for instance, it's looking about these energy solutions, how do you connect those who don't have access to energy to those who actually provide these? So, it's really about, maybe your drawing board starts with the SDGs, and then you start looking at problems, really looking at what are their barriers to achieve this, and then looking on how technology or connecting, using technology or using the power of networks, for instance, to be able to help those who don't have access have access. I think that's a good start to that. But then, you keep drawing, all those, those interconnections, for you to be able to design those solutions, and then, start from there. Consult with your target beneficiaries and see, if that is something that can support them. And of course, the cost for it, right? Maybe it's a great solution, but it's not something that is easily implementable. Then, it becomes a challenge for you. So I don't know, but that's the interesting part of entrepreneurship, right? It's really about finding that out. And those who are supporting entrepreneurs, I think that is like for me, it's really about, I'm always interested in the stories behind these barriers. What stops them from getting it? How is the private sector, how is the government, providing the different opportunities, the different levers and pulleys for that, right? And how do these forces interact in this marketplace, in this space? Does that make sense?
It's so wonderful how yes, like it's so wonderful how you kind of put that together in painting, right? Like how it's an ecosystem approach. It's multi-stakeholders that need to be involved in economic development. And for sure, there are different factors that are at play, but if we're working together and we find solutions, right, that are relevant and then can actually drive to the point and, make an impact, then that's, why we do things, right? And I know that there's really much more to kind of learn and relearn. And perhaps as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of pieces of advice and insights that you've shared already. But I think one of the key things that you really shared throughout this conversation is the importance of education, right? And it's not just education in like the formal education, but really throughout the course of our lives, right? I guess we're all students or all learners.
Lifelong learners.
Lifelong learners. Yes, and we need to create, opportunities and platforms so that a lot of people, if not all people, have the opportunity to reskill themselves and make sure that they can contribute, right, to society and to have, like you said, decent work and be part of society. So maybe to wrap up on a lighter note, a lot of interesting things we shared, but maybe on that note of learning new things. Earlier, you said that, when you joined the foundation, you actually had to learn learn how to ride the bike. What would you want to learn next, right? Whether it's, I don't know if it's also like a pastime or maybe for work. What is one thing that you're thinking of learning, maybe in the next couple of weeks or, by the end of this year?
I have a list. I don't know. I'm in a constant learning process. Like really, it's about just getting new ideas, because sometimes you get stuck already with the usual ideas and you want something new. Lately, I've been looking into creative leadership. Applying creative, artists' techniques to leadership. Because it's a way for you to design solutions with your stakeholders, right? Providing a different approach so that they have a fresher perspective to things. Because especially when you are talking to people who are already frustrated, right? That like, here's another new program, this might not work again, and it's really by providing them those new solutions. And I remember, for the Women in STEM program, we did the soft skills training program, which you think it's just teaching them how to think critically and creatively, but it wasn't as simple as that, really. It was really helping them map out together and bringing out solutions based on the work experiences of different people, right? And it becomes a learning opportunity every time. Every time it's a different company, it's a different, for as long as you're open, really, to understand where they're coming from, what solutions, what tools do they have within their companies, it becomes a different story. It's the same module, but it's always a different story. And lately, I just finished a marathon a few months ago, and I want to improve. It wasn't a very good time. Marathons would brag about, but I would say I finished it. And so now I'm in that process of learning to run faster. Sometimes it's a skill that you already it's a skill that you already know, but you don't know that well. Maybe that can be, you can never say that you don't have to learn something new. There's always something new to learn. I'm that kind of person. But now I'm in that process, so I'm relearning it, and hopefully another marathon maybe next year or maybe this year. Just finishing one is already a milestone. 2 in a year is already an amazing achievement for me, given the work that you need to do. But yeah, maybe run faster. Run faster. I don't know how that's gonna happen. I've been training, but again, with the tools that you have, right? How are you maximizing those tools, and how do you make yourself better? But at the end of the day, right, the only person you're trying to live up to is yourself, right? That you become a better person than you were yesterday.
Absolutely. And it's a constant learning experience through life, and trying to improve and, like you said, better yourself. Not just for work, but also obviously throughout your life in different areas in your life.
Yes, yeah.
So thank you so much, Lights. I learned a lot. Definitely. I think this episode was definitely a full, learning journey also. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your insights, and obviously, perspectives that we wanted to share also to our listeners to this podcast, and hopefully exploring opportunities in the Philippines. So thanks again so much, Lights. And for all of you, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Questions with Lights Viloria. For more episodes like this, be sure to hit the follow button on whichever platform you're listening from. Again, I am your host, April Vano. Thank you very much. Until next time.